Welcome to today's episode of the Bryan G Real Estate Podcast. I'm your host, Brian Gutierrez. If you're enjoying the show and receiving value from our content, please hit the subscribe button so that you won't miss out on the next episode. Now let's check out today's show. Hi, welcome to the Bryan G Real Estate Podcast. We have another great episode for you here today. Today we'll be interviewing Dawn Burdick from Titleocity. Hello.
Hello.
And we're answering the big question that everyone has been asking. What exactly is title?
Right.
I'm sure you probably never get that question.
Right. Can't wait to dive in. I don't think my family even knows what I do. So it's okay. I'm happy to explain.
Well, thanks for coming on the show today. To start off with, why don't you just tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Well, first of all, Happy New Year. I have a couple of gifts for you. Titleocity tumbler for you, and then a planner. Some people are still using the planners.
Great.
So I've got one of these. And then even for an added bonus, if you want, I've got a giant dust calendar. Some people love them for scribble, and some people actually use them. So I'll set them over here, and we'll get to those a little later, but little New Year's gifts for you.
Excellent. We love swag.
Yes, for sure. For sure. So Dawn Burdick with Titleocity, and I have been in the real estate business now for 19 years. Started off as a realtor. I was on maternity leave, and I was sitting on my HOA, my home association board. And
that's always fun.
Yeah, I know. And I was, I think, the youngest at the time on the board, and started to get to know them. And they started talking about moving. And I thought, maybe I should get my real estate license. I've already earned their trust.
Okay.
And so just kind of started just in my little area, and I've given up at real estate, as an agent for the last 8 years or so now. But but I have that background, which is kind of cool, which adds to really the title side of things. Okay. So started working for a law firm during the 2008, 9, and 10 foreclosure law firm. So learned a lot about title, and then of course used my real estate. Oh yes, it was a wild time.
There was a lot going on then.
Yes, there was lots to learn, and then just kind of slid into title eventually. So I always say it's nice to be able to interpret what my realtor partners are trying to ask about title, because it's not the easiest thing to understand. Right. It seems like every deal has something different.
Sure, that's true.
Right. So that's kind of how I came here. I've been in Titleocity for 6 years now. And I'm so close to being in the actual real estate business for, like I said, 19 going on 20 years now.
Well, that's great. Well, having the realtor background is huge.
Yeah.
Because like you said, you truly understand our questions when we bring it to you.
Right.
And believe me, there's a lot of questions.
Yes.
I use this analogy all the time. I see real estate transaction is like a big onion, right? You just keep peeling the layers. It just never ends. It never stops.
Lots to it. And ever changing market quarterly now, it seems,
Right.
Yeah.
All right. So if we can, just kind of walk us through the general process of how title how title works. And I guess that kind of begins with myself as an agent. Right. I have a listing. We finally get a contract. We agree upon it. And now that we're under contract, we need to begin title work.
Yep. Yes. So what is important to a title company is we do need that purchase agreement. The purchase agreement outlines the terms of what both sides have agreed upon.
Yep.
So the title company goes by what public record shows for the actual property. And then we have to go by what the purchase agreement says. So the purchase agreement is like one of the most important things to see. We want to know when you want to close. We want to know what the EMD is, the earnest money deposit is. Mm-hmm. We need to know, all the parties and who's involved and what the terms are. So that's the first piece that we're going to ask you. Now, if you are on the listing side, we always ask, send in your pre-title, meaning send us the seller's information, name, and then and names sometimes, right? And then the property address. That way we can go ahead and do our homework first. Take a peek to see what title looks like. Most of the time it's exactly what the sellers think it is.
Okay. All right.
So that would be one thing that we would do. But so we would start with the purchase agreement. But if you're on the seller side, we've already most likely got that pre-title listing. And we're doing the title search, making sure that Mr. and Mrs. are on, or, Mrs. is on, or whatever it might be, whatever their situation is, matches what they think title looks like.
Right. And all of those details that you just mentioned, for those of you who may not know, are in the purchase agreement. I kind of
Correct.
consider that as like the mother document,
Hmm.
right?
Absolutely.
We have addendums, we have other things that come up, but really everything comes down to the purchase agreement.
Right,
Yep.
right, exactly. Yep. And then once we have that purchase agreement, we are going to start the title search. If we haven't already on the pre-title side, on the buy side, we're starting that. We're working with the lender.
Okay.
Um, so
So
keep
what are you searching for? What are the details you're trying
sure.
to find?
So title insurance in general is it is a one-time cost that you pay at closing, and but it protects the owner's rights. So what we're searching for is we want to make sure that that there's no liens on title,
Hmm.
and there's your standard liens. There's your if there's a mortgage on title, if somebody went to wall side windows and put windows in and leaned it against their against their property,
Right.
and that's okay. Those are things that we're used to seeing. If there is a break in the chain of title, for example, if there's a quit claim deed that's just kind of thrown in the chain of title.
Mm.
And when I say chain, it literally is we're looking to see and making sure that everything, makes sense from, once one person conveyed, interest to the next, that we're making sure that it's all in a row and there's nothing that's kind of there's no break in the chain.
Okay. Do you also look for in that? Do you also look for like tax assessments too?
Yep.
Is that part of
That all
that?
pops up as well. Yep.
Okay,
So it's all
gotcha.
connected to the property. Anything that's connected to the property, we
Okay,
are going to search for. So if for taxes, we're going to make sure that those are paid. Any buyer who's entering into an agreement is going to rely on their realtor to make sure that everything looks like it's supposed to, and that we're going to move in and enjoy the house and enjoy the property without any issues. And one of those ways that you can do that as a realtor is using a title company to make sure that there's nothing nothing that anybody has to worry about later on.
right. And so when we have the purchase agreements will tell us how those special assessments are handled.
Hmm.
So some assessments run with the property.
Hmm.
Like there's some cities where you have like $160. I think the city of Highland has this that runs with the property. Well, that's for your trash removal, right?
Right.
Things like that.
Right.
But there's other assessments though that, like say for road improvement or something else with the neighborhood, that may need to be paid for by the seller
Correct.
at closing, at or before
Correct. Yep.
closing.
And
Yeah.
we'll pull that for you. So that's the other thing the title company does is we're kind of a pivotal um, you know um, party that hosts all of those documents, and we're just a big checklist
Right.
making sure that everybody's giving the things that we need. And I mean, from lender, buyer, seller, realtor, partners, and all that. So we're making sure that we're getting just a big checklist to make sure that we've got everything
So
in.
while we realtors are dealing with the drama, you guys
Yes.
are going down the checklist.
Yes, yes, yes. And I have to say, when we get that purchase agreement, we know that 90% of all of the things that realtors do is pretty much done. You have shopped, you have shown homes, you've gone on the listing appointment, made sure that everything was all set and ready to go. So by the time we get the purchase agreement, typically 90% of what you do is done. But for us, we've just started. So,
Right.
and we want that we want it to look like it's behind, we don't want you to ever feel like there's so much more to do, but we really are doing a lot of things in the, behind the scenes, to get you prepared. But
Right.
yeah.
And something that an experienced agent will do, when I have a new transaction is I will pull the PRD or public record.
Right.
And if I do see an assessment, I will, even before we send it to you guys, I will call the township, be like, hey, what are the details on this assessment, whatever. And then that way, when it finally gets to you guys, at least give you a heads up. I know you'll notice it anyway,
Right.
but it's also good for me to know that it's there.
Right.
And to at least know roughly what it is,
Right.
like to define it, right?
And that's great. I love hearing that, because I love, we will ask realtors too, when we're doing trainings, we'll say, be sure to contact the township and in the city, just to make sure that there isn't anything kind of hanging out. We're going to find it anyways, but it's not a bad idea to just find out, beforehand. If you're shopping in that area or showing properties in that area, you might as well, check to see and just say, hey, heads up, there's an extra tax because of X, Y, and Z. So I'm
Right.
glad to hear that. And I mean, it makes sense. Someone like you, doing your homework and being ahead of all of it.
Yeah. So, all right. So now that that process is going, what's the next step?
So we get the purchase agreement. We have started title search, and so we are looking at records in public records. So the county hosts those. So we have access to all 83 counties in Michigan.
Okay.
So we will search to see what's on title, and then we have an in-house exam team, which means that we have a whole department dedicated to actual examining of the title, and that's super important because that's what the buyers and the sellers are paying for the title insurance,
Gotcha.
is to make sure that we are doing our due diligence and finding anything that might pop up, and then we are making sure that things were properly recorded. Um, and so some of the good things that are just good questions to ask when you are meeting with clients is, how long have you lived here? And they might say, oh, my mom deeded me the property 5 years ago.
Mm,
Okay, then that makes us think, all right, then we need to make sure that those lines were,
right.
everything was fulfilled there. So we're going through all of those things, matching up with the purchase agreement says and with title. And so we're essentially clearing title for you. We're not saying, here's something that came up on title and we need you to call the county and figure out why. At Titleocity, we actually have our escrow processors that are doing that for you and trying to figure out, work out all the kinks if there's anything. Like I said, usually there's not, but it just gives you peace of mind knowing that we're going to be looking
Yeah,
for that.
and that's the level of service that you guys provide that you're really good at. Because just so you guys know, it's more. I mean, yes, we have a checklist of things to do, but it's actually like at times like a bit of detective work, like
Hmm.
tracking those things down.
Sure.
And so that's being proactive like that. I've had other title companies, not yours, where they're like, oh, there's this thing. Can you call the township and let us know what they say?
Right.
And I'm like,
Yeah.
guys, please, I don't mind helping out.
Right, right. And more than likely
But
we've seen it before. So we know the language, we know what to ask for, we know when,
right,
what their responses are and what we might need more of. But yeah, that's important. I mean, you've got lots of other things going on, and your clients are getting ready to move, they're getting boxes and packing up, they're getting the appraisals happening at this
right,
time, and inspections happening at this time. So we're kind of, working through title and clearing that.
right. So, what are some examples of like some other examples of things that would not clear title or like a red flag? So you're
Yeah.
investigating these things, and
So
what catches your eye? That's like, ooh, that's not good.
So I just had we just had an email from one of our realtor partners who said the seller has passed away, and so the son is going to take over and sell the property.
Hmm.
And so would you like us to send the will? And so one of the biggest misconceptions is that a will does not convey or transfer property.
Correct. Yes.
So, so I would say, you want to make sure, if there is, if you are willed a property, make sure you have a trust. A trust is going to be the best way of defining who gets what, who has the authority to sell the property and sign all of the documentation. And so that I would say that pops up, not on a regular basis, but where it's, oh, here's or they'll say, here's the trust. We, had it done 20 years ago. Should be all set
Right.
and good to go. Well, things change over the years, right?
Yes.
So that certificate of trust, or COT, you'll hear that.
Hmm.
We need the certificate of trust. And we usually, like that right around about 3 months or so, 3 to 6 months or so, where it's updated and it shows, the attorney has signed off on it saying that there have been no changes, or these are the changes.
Right. So that's something that if you're getting ready to list, you do have a trust, right? That's something that you, the homeowner, should do, is contact the attorney and just have it updated.
Correct.
It may already be updated, but if something, if a trust has been around for 10 years, yeah, you do need to have that. So that's something, when I qualify a seller, those are the questions I ask. So I
Hmm.
found out there's a trust immediately. I'm just like, okay, if your attorney call, please have them sign off on this, make
Right.
sure it's okay. So we don't delay anything.
Right. Yeah. So I would say that that's, those kinds of things will pop up where they'll say, well, it shows that I'm able to, take care of the property afterwards. It's not quite there. Another kind of fun thing that you could do. And I call it fun because I used to be afraid of them, but they're ladybird deeds. And
Yeah, tell
they're
us a little bit about that.
sure.
Yeah.
So it's a life estate deed.
Okay.
So it acts a lot like a trust.
Okay.
It has to be drafted by a real estate attorney. You don't want anybody drafting it because it's very specific. The
Okay.
language in there has to say when the owner passes away, the property is conveyed to, or the authority goes to, and it has to have the exact person.
Gotcha.
So the terms have to be, like I said, very specific. So you would want, like I said, a real estate attorney drafting that, but it does act. It acts like a trust. It's something that you can have drafted up pretty easily. It's just for the property. It's
Right.
not for the cars and for the jewelry or anything like that. That's what the will is for, right?
Okay. Gotcha.
So so that's another thing to kind of look into is, well, I have a will. That's great. I don't know if I want to going through the trust. There's, sometimes it can be a little, costly. But if they just aren't ready to do it, to get a trust done,
Right.
a ladybird deed is the way to go.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah, and in this time where you can download forms for everything,
Yeah.
you still need to, homeowners, please still
Yes.
go through us professionals.
Yes,
because
I know.
it's that one detail that's missed that could
Oh, yeah.
derail everything.
Oh, right. Exactly.
Or delay everything
Yeah.
to a really bad level.
And keep in mind, counties are different, so you could download a form that, is a state form, but it could be, there could be something different that the county's looking for, in these
Right.
forms. So yeah, having a professional look at them, I can't stress enough, having a professional take a peek and making sure that everything's in there that you need in there.
Okay, so now that we've cleared our title,
Right.
Next is clear to close, right?
Right. Those are the magic words.
Those are the three magic words: clear
It's so,
to close.
Like confetti falls from the sky, I think, when every time someone gets the clear to close.
Big sign.
I know. So that means that the lender is ready to go, that the lender has qualified completely the buyer, and the seller, all of the title work is being handled. Keep in mind too, during clearing the title, it's the seller side of the deal that is clearing the title. The buy side. The buy side is working with the lender to be qualified fully, and then also to provide a lender's policy. The buyer is responsibility is to provide that lender's title policy. Seller is owner's policy. If you don't have a lender and it's a cash deal, then you have one policy, and that's the owner side. So it's a trick question during trainings. We'll ask realtors after we go through all of it. We're like, how many policies do you need for a cash deal? So so keep that in mind. So once we get the clear to close, that clear to close is really coming from the lender, because most things are wrapped up for the title side. Clear to close, yay, we're going to schedule.
Yes, and just as a side note on that, no, that's a really important detail, because I've had sellers, sometimes time is of the essence.
Sure.
And they're like, why don't your people have clear to close yet? I'm like, it's not coming from our side, right? It's not from the list side.
Correct.
It's coming from, the underwriters have to clear all the lending, right?
Yes.
We need to get that clear to close from the lender. So that's a very important detail to remember, that on the listing side is not always in our control.
Right.
That is something that we have to wait for the lender. Now, experienced agents like myself, we will keep an eye on that. If we see that the timeline's going a little bit too long,
right,
or a little bit longer than what we agreed to, or kind of getting close to those deadlines, because throughout this process, everything has a beginning and an end.
Sure.
If we see we're kind of approaching those deadlines, that's when good agents will pick up the phone, call the lender. Hey, how we doing? Right. It's usually under, is there anything you need from us? Right. We kind of approach it, kind of diplomatically,
exactly. Right? How's your day?
Yeah, we don't want to step on any toes, but we have 2 days to wrap this up.
Right, exactly.
So, but that's really important, homeowners. So the clear to close comes from the lender.
Correct. Yep. So once we get the clear to close, we're scheduling a closing for you. So so we are at Titleocity, and every title company, you've got the title side, which I had mentioned. We have our in-house exam team. We're doing the review and the title. We also have escrow side. The escrow side is wrapping the file. The department is we have escrow officers who are actually wrapping the file. So they're going through like a fine-tooth comb, making sure that all the numbers match up. If we're off by one penny from the lender or from anything, we start over again and we have to make sure that everything is worked up, and we are following the terms of the purchase agreement and any addendums that may have come along the way.
Right. And just to backtrack a little
Yeah,
bit, homeowners, we cannot schedule the closing until we get the clear to close.
correct.
That's another question I get a lot.
Thank you for
It's
saying that. That's like such a nice little New Year's gift to me. Um,
yeah.
too often we'll get where it's like, well, we know we're going to get the clear to close, so we should go ahead and schedule it ahead of time. But some things can change. And rather than closing in the morning, maybe we have to close in the afternoon,
Right.
or scheduling a closing together is fantastic. It's kind of the traditional way, right? But I would say about 50% of the time we're not seeing buyers and sellers closing together, maybe because of a work conflict,
Sure. Yeah.
or whatever it might be. So if we can close together, that's great. Everybody's, we usually disperse right then and there.
Hmm.
The funds are in. So those are the things that we're working out for the closing part of it. But you're right. We cannot, until we get the words clear to close officially, we can't schedule it.
Exactly. And I get I get sellers all the time.
Yeah, I know.
Like,
And I
we
want
know
to
we're
say
free
yes.
next week. Well,
I
yeah,
know.
but
I know. The
we
worst
don't
part is
actually.
though, like you're so close to, the finish line. And then if we get if we're close to getting clear to close and we just say, fine, we'll schedule it, which we've learned our lesson, we don't do that. But then everybody gets all excited. And if the closing date changes, all of that excitement and all of the things that have gone right, just, it's kind of starts to like, oh, great. Just get this feeling like, oh, great. Now we've got a delay and you're worried. So it's like, just wait till we get the clear to close and everything will run,
Right, because then
just
people see it
smooth.
as a delay when it's not really a delay,
Correct.
right?
Correct.
Yeah, and that's such a huge
Yeah.
part of my job is setting expectations, right?
Sure.
It is so
Yes,
important.
it really is.
Like,
It really is. And communication is, and being
yeah,
transparent, not just, oh, it's fine, trust me kind of thing, but like literally telling them exactly, what to expect, and
right,
next steps and that kind of thing, I think is huge. And we do the same thing on the title side for our realtor partners and lender partners.
right, yeah,
Here's what's happening. We're waiting on this and we're very close to this, or this is what this means, just so that everybody kind of understands something that you're not going to get if you go in alone without a professional. It's a guess. You're guessing, gosh, I'm hoping these things are working out. And so that's what's nice about people like communicating and letting everybody know
yeah.
what's next.
Communication is just, I mean, it's just key, and
Yeah,
that's another thing to look for with a good agent too. I update my people every Monday. They get an update from me, even
that's
if there's
awesome.
nothing to update.
Yeah,
At least let them know, hey, thinking about you, or this is what happened over the weekend, or
right,
whatever. Like, or here's what to expect later in the week,
right. That's
right?
fantastic. Yeah,
Yeah, and that's really important. I know that Titleocity, that you guys are really really good with communicating that to us too, so
hmm,
that we can pass that along, to you, the homeowner, right?
right, right.
You're listening to the Bryan G Real Estate Podcast. If you'd like to learn more about me, check out my YouTube channel, Bryan Gutierrez Keller Williams Real Estate, or go to my Facebook page, Bryan Gutierrez Keller Williams. And if you want to hear more of this podcast, please subscribe. Now back to the show. So now coming to the closing disclosure,
Hmm.
this I'd like you to kind of explain here, because explain when when we get, it's basically getting the numbers for the transaction,
Right.
right? And so kind of explain that and what those numbers mean and what
Sure.
to look for if you're a seller and also if you're a buyer.
Sure. So the Alta statements are the closing. It's either called Alta settlement closing statement. So we used to call it the HUD statement back in the
That's right.
day, right?
Yep.
So I when I'm doing closings, I like to start with the Alta statement, because it's just a nice compilation of all of the fees and all of like who's getting what and on what side. It's a nice, at a glance, these are all of the things that are happening. So
So for our analytical engineers, accountants, and lawyers,
yeah,
right?
yep, yes,
This has everything to the penny, right?
to the penny. So
Right
property
there.
address, buyer seller information, list price, pretty much all of the things that are on that purchase agreement. And so you're able to see, what the lender fees are. You're
Hmm.
able to see what the title insurance policy is, depending if you're, buyer or seller side. You're looking at the recording fees, all of the things that are on there. So I start off with that because the documents that follow, you can reference and say, the fee that we were talking about here, or the line item we were talking about here,
Gotcha.
is right. This is the document that we were referencing.
So the
And
purchase agreement's the mother document for the sale.
yeah, right.
This, right? The
Yes,
Alta
yes, yes.
statement's the mother
It
document for
is
title.
right, right, and
Yeah.
that's really what everybody wants to peek at. And I say, you really need to go there. And I know you do this, but go through that Alta statement with your buyers or sellers
Yes.
before the closing. Just
Yep.
a 10-minute phone call. Let me just go through just so that you understand all of the things, because sometimes people will think, oh, I'll just ask at closing. Well, at closing, it's like where everyone's kind of going through the motion and doing the things. And so
Right.
sometimes they don't want to ask. And then later they're like, well, I didn't understand this. So I think it's
Or
just,
or if someone thinks there's a discrepancy,
right,
you want to address that way before the closing table.
right.
Because now to change documents, which we can do if we have
Yes, we
to,
can.
it's a big deal.
Yeah.
Everyone's
exactly.
scrambling and scanning and emailing,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
then they got to verify, so that takes a little bit of time.
Yeah.
So when do people get to closing disclosure? When is
So
that
you
released?
should be getting that about 24 hours before the closing.
Correct. Yep.
That is the goal. We like to get the clear to close, and we like to get 48 hours from when we get the clear to close for when we close. So on a Tuesday at noon, we get the clear to close. We'll close Thursday at noonish or whatever, sometime that day.
Mm-hmm.
So we work up, we, meaning Titleocity, our escrow officers, will work up the file. And then I always say they put it in a nice, pretty package, and then that we're giving it to you. Now, if you are the seller, you are going to receive the package from the title company.
Okay.
If you are the buyer, there's sensitive material information in the closing package that can't just be emailed by a title person or a title rep or from a realtor. It's going to
Correct.
come from the lender.
Right.
Because not everybody needs to know everybody's business on there, which is why they changed from the HUD to the Alta, because the HUD had a lot of sensitive information. So that's going to come from the lender. And then if you're wiring funds as the buyer, you are going to receive the wire instructions from the lender. And
in that statement, right?
In that packet. And so
Correct.
it's our Titleocity's wire instructions. However, that's in a nice, it comes in a nice little email, and then it gets sent directly to the buyer. And then, in that way, they've got their information and they can go through it. So I would say about 24 hours before. Now, that's a perfect situation.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes if you're waiting on a couple things, maybe the underwriter, for the lenders, just got a couple little tweaks, couple little things they need. So, you might get it, a little bit later that day, and you're closing at noon, kind of thing. So, but just be
Right.
prepared, to get that. And I would want to see those before I go into closing.
Right. And a big part of getting these numbers in advance really came from 2008, 2010,
Mm-hmm.
right? When it was just the Wild West and everything
Yeah.
was just, it's embarrassingly crazy how crazy things were.
Oh yeah. That's when I entered
I mean,
the real estate market, where I was like, oh, this is kind of fun. It's like,
and so
didn't know any better.
So part of those new regulations that came out were to give buyer and seller, right, the numbers in advance.
Correct.
Right, because a lot of that was coming in right at closing, and like we said earlier, it's a big deal to change something significant at closing for all the verification that comes through. And so that's, I guess some of the good that came from that whole awful experience, 2008, 2010, is that things are, more organized now. Mm-hmm. And so that's a really important development that has happened the last several years,
right,
as a result of
that. Yep. Yeah. So then the closing disclosure, obviously go through that with Bryan. And then once we get to closing, like I had mentioned before, sometimes we have a split closing where you'll have, buyers and sellers are signing at different times, and that's okay.
Mm-hmm.
Disbursement is not going to happen at the closing table, because what we say in title lingo is we have to marry the packages. So
right.
If the buyer closed at 9 a.m., seller's closing at noon, then on that same day we have to make sure that all the documents get together, and then the lender is asking for certain documentations from the closing from both sides.
Okay.
And then as soon as they get that, then they give the green light and they send the money.
Now here's a question you get all the time.
Yeah.
So if we're doing a split closing, mm-hmm. and just so you guys know, this can happen because maybe someone's working on the west side, someone's working on the east side. We just can't get everyone in the same room.
Right.
Or maybe someone's relocating out of state. We can close someone in Texas and close someone here in Michigan on the same day.
Yeah.
and I have to admit, I forget the answer to this question. And it comes up every once in a while. So when you're doing a split closing, there is an order on who has to close first.
So it used to be where, the seller has to sign first that day, no matter what. So the seller has to sign at 9 a.m. However, if they're closing on the same day, then it's okay. What you
Okay.
don't want is you don't want the buyer purchasing on paper a property that isn't even offered to them yet, sold to them yet. So sellers
Gotcha.
have not
Okay.
said, yes, I will sell. Now, what we do sometimes, like you had mentioned, people are out of state, they're relocating. We will do what's called a pre-seller sign.
Just going to ask you
Yeah.
about that. Yep.
So the day before, or it's usually the day before. Well, they'll say, well, I'm gonna pre-sign. Then the documents get to the closing table where the buyer is, and then you can disperse after that. But yeah, you can't have a buyer close on a Wednesday and the seller close on a Thursday. You can't do that. The lender's going to want to see that the dates, match up, and that the seller was selling the property and actually signed the documents to say, I will sell this property. So
Yeah, because they really make sense. So because how it's funny because even though there's all these layers to this transaction, it does happen in a logical order.
right.
You can't buy something that hasn't been offered to you.
Correct. Yep.
Right. So
Yeah. So we can pre-sign, and a lot of times lately we've had out of state closings. So snowbirds maybe that are selling, and they don't obviously want to come back up. So we'll send a notary to them. And then, so we usually need 24 hours, one more day, so that we can get those documents back from the
Gotcha.
notary.
Okay.
And then, like I said, marry the packages with the buyer, and then we can disperse. But that's usually like an extra day. And then just a side note too, we can offer the remote online notarization, or otherwise known as RON.
Okay.
So if you can't have a notary in front of you, we now can do the remote online just with the laptop, as long as you have a camera and microphone, and you kind of can understand, like, the prompts. We can close anywhere. I mean, literally, we had somebody close on an airplane once.
My craziest closing, split closing. This is crazy. It was a different title company.
Mm-hmm.
So buyers and sellers. Okay, I'm talking directly to you right now. If there's any kind of complication before closing, please give me as much notice as possible so we can make these arrangements. We can work around anything you got going on.
Oh yeah.
We can do this. We have the technology. However, I have to have enough notice. I had a home list this about maybe 3 years ago, and I'm a little sketchy on the details, but I'll remember this forever. And so I had the sellers, and they were relocating it was Texas. So they were relocating there, and I'm about, I don't know, maybe 8 days before closing. And so, of course, I'm, talking with the sellers, just kind of, hey, here's where we're at. There's a little lag time. Like once we're past appraisal and waiting for title work and the underwriters from lending, it kind of gets quiet for us agents, right? Like at first we're all in the trenches and we're running around.
That's what I'm saying. Like that's when you kind of get to exhale during that period that you're talking about.
Right.
Yeah, you just exhale like nothing's really happening right now.
Yeah, and so like I said, so I still call people, just give them up. They're like, hey, everything's, no. At that point, no news is good news.
Right.
This is great.
Exactly.
And then, and I'm like, is there anything I need to know or whatever? And he just said like, no, everything's good. I'm like, hey, great. And I forget what triggered it. It was an email or something, but just caught a little phrase.
Yeah.
Where right at the end he was like, so my wife doesn't need to sign either, right?
Oh.
And I'm like, yeah, she does. She signed a deed.
Uh-huh.
She was on it.
Yeah.
And so I'm like,
and on the PA, and
boom, I pick up the phone. I'm like, hey, what does this mean? Like, I mean, there's like this whole email and this little tiny phrase at the end of it.
Isn't that something? Like it meant everything.
It meant, so I'm like, this is why we don't skim emails.
Right.
We actually read all the words.
Yeah.
So anyway, I'm like, hey, what's going on? Is it, this is 8 days before closing. Oh. My wife's brother's getting married in India, and she's there for the month. For the wedding.
Oh, okay.
And I am like,
oh boy,
is she gonna be back?
Yes.
And he's like, oh no, she'll be gone for like another 2 weeks. I'm like,
man,
oh my god.
So the consulate or POA?
Well,
power of attorney.
I called that title guy, and I'm like, and he was good.
Yeah,
like,
it's good.
Help me! What do I do?
Yeah.
I'm on the phone, and he's like, we're on it. And so,
Yeah.
and she was like in the country, like she wasn't like in a city.
Wow.
She was like
Yeah, like no
out.
Starbucks around
Yeah,
to
no
go
Starbucks.
run in and with a notary.
Nope. And so it was like, at first they were going to have to get her to a consulate, which was like, I mean, like 12 hours away from where she was at.
Mhm.
So it was like, oh, this is going to be kind of hard. I'm like, okay, I understand it's going to be a challenge, but I need you guys to do this.
Yeah, it
It
needs to
was going to
happen.
be a car ride to a train station to whatever to get to
No.
the,
Oh,
and
man.
I am like freaking out at this
Yes,
time because we're like
right.
so close to closing. And fortunately, instead of having to go all the way to the consulate, credit to that title company, they called
Yeah,
and they actually found a bank that would actually be able, which cut off about 4 hours, so she still had to
yeah.
go 8 hours.
Oh, man.
But they were able to get a bank to scan, translate documents, right? Have her sign it, have it notarized,
That's great.
sent back, scanned back to us, translate it, and we closed on time.
Oh,
I couldn't
that was awesome.
believe it. I
Yeah.
was I was losing my mind.
Yeah.
Like, what do I
Of
do?
all the
Like,
things, everything came in, and then it's that one thing that literally will make or break, the closing.
wow.
So that's good that they were able to do it. And the consulate's like an embassy, just FYI. It's,
Yeah.
it works just like an embassy.
And so that's why, talking to, home buyers and sellers, that's why it's so important to have a professional agent with a great team to work with like Titleocity. Because when these crazy things happen,
Right.
we somehow make the shoestring catch,
Yeah, it's
right?
true. It's true because
And make it happen.
it's the same with realtors and lenders and title companies. You if you have, they're all supposed to do the same thing, right?
Hmm.
But when something goes off or wrong or whatever it is, you want to have somebody that you can trust and that has done this before and knows. And I think that we added it up one time. We have at Titleocity 340 plus years of experience with like everybody's experience.
Oh, wow.
And so
Right.
we've all seen a lot of things. I don't want to say everything. I want to knock on wood, but we've
Right.
seen a lot of things, so we can get creative with things, like that. So
Right.
it matters who you're in business with, obviously,
Oh,
for things
absolutely.
pop up.
Oh, yeah. So after closing and everything, what's the final step after that?
So after closing, the everybody's going to get their package, their closing packages,
Hmm.
and the sellers have a few things. I should say the buyers have a few things that they need to go to the city to file. So typically, your closer is going to put those two documents on top of the closing package, and I usually, when I'm closing, I'll earmark it just to say you need to go in, and you have a certain amount of days to go in to get those filed. But I say if you can go the day of, because I
Yes.
know what it's like,
Hmm.
when you're closing and you've got all your boxes around and then you put the closing package away and it's but it matters. There's documents that if you don't file, you'll have it affects your taxes and there's some fees and things like that. So
So if someone is relocating,
mhm.
are you able to file that for them?
We are.
Okay,
Yes, we are.
good.
Yes, we are. So we will definitely do a favor, for them. And then we say, call to follow up to make sure that they've received it. But yeah, we absolutely will. We will file those for them if they need us to. So after the closing, depending on kind of what, if we close together or not, we are waiting for the funds to come from the lender. So everyone's kind of like you said, it's a everybody's waiting on, it's like a domino effect. So we've got the closing, we're done. And, but the lender needs, some of those documents to show that we've signed and we've closed.
Okay,
Then as soon as they approve, they give us, the green light, they send the money, the funds. And then after that, then we can disperse.
gotcha.
So we love wiring at Titleocity. Most title companies will now.
Right,
So, sometimes sellers will want a check at closing, and it's fine. We obviously do that.
right.
But check with your financial institution and make sure that there's not going to be a long waiting period. Sometimes wires will go through a little bit faster. And
Okay,
so
all right.
keep that in mind. It's worth, I think, the $37 that, or $35 that the bank charges, the title company to wire the funds. But I would say if you can wire. One other thing, if you are closing in an estate, a trust, an LLC, be sure that you have a bank account that is open in that entity. Too often we'll have, where it's like a week before and they'll say, yep, I'd prefer a check. Okay, great. We're going to cut a check. And we'll ask, do you have a bank account open in that entity? Oh, no, I don't. Do I need to? Yes. You can't
Yes.
go and cash a check, that's written payable to Dawn Burdick LLC when you only have, Dawn and Ross Burdick, account at your bank. So you want to make sure that that everything has to match. Title, purchase agreement, check.
Excellent. And so I just want to highlight something that
Sure.
you just said there, because people ask me all the time. Um, they'll be like, people ask me, so when do I get my money from you?
Right.
Right. And what you said is I just want to highlight the title company holds and disperses the funds.
Correct.
The broker does not. The
Mm-mm.
agent does not.
Right.
Right. It all
Yeah.
goes through the title
It
company.
does, yeah.
Right.
And that's the third party. You want a third party handling the funds. You want, that's where the word escrow comes out of, title and escrow services. We are
Correct.
holding other people's money,
Yep.
and we don't want to hold it for a long time. So if you do have occupancy for 30 days after, if you're the seller, and we as the title company and you as a realtor, will have, we have to have that form signed that says, release of occupancy, meaning the seller has moved out now, and the new owner's moved in. Typically, there's money that the occupancy fees that are held at the title company until everybody signs off on that form and says we're all good. We don't want to hold your money for too long, so we'll bug you. Like we didn't get the form yet, but yeah,
Right.
that's what we do, and we disperse. And again, going back to the Alta statement at the closing documents, that first sheet is going to tell you where and who's getting the money. For
Gotcha.
tax prorations, for example.
Right.
The seller is going to get a credit in a lot of the counties here in Southeast Michigan.
Mhm.
It depends on the county and your taxes and when you pay them. But typically, you're paying in advance as a seller for
Correct.
taxes.
Yep.
So at closing, you're going to get the prorated taxes and the credit.
Correct.
Yep.
Yep. Well, thanks. Is there anything else you want to add about the general title process? That
I
was really comprehensive
I know,
breakdown. That's
and I
great.
want to say it's good for just to understand what's happening behind the scenes, but keep in mind it's behind the scenes. It's
Yes.
not anything that we're bothering you, like along the way. We're doing our thing that we do at behind the scenes with Titleocity. The nice thing too is that you're going to get an escrow processor dedicated to you as a realtor and to your client. So you're not going to be bounced around to 7 different people while we're collecting this information.
Right. And this is something that people ask us agents all the time. They're like, "What exactly do you do?" Well, if I'm
Mhm.
doing my job, you don't see any of this.
Correct.
Right. And
Exactly. Yeah.
you're right. And this
Yeah.
is all the stuff that we do that people don't see. It's more
Right.
than just sticking a sign in your yard, right? It's us communicating with title and with lenders and with you guys,
Right.
home buyers and sellers. And it's all of that coordinating. And as you can hear, there's a lot going
Mhm.
on, right?
Mhm.
So it definitely is to your advantage to have professional realtor, great title company like Titleocity, because you guys are just awesome to work with. And
Thank
that
you.
is, I can't stress how important both of those things are.
Mhm.
So, just to kind of wrap up, why don't you tell us a little bit more about Titleocity itself and what makes you guys kind of different from other title
Sure.
companies?
Sure. And we've had the opportunity to work with you, and we love that. That
Mhm.
was so we appreciate that. We cover, as I had mentioned, 83 counties in the state of Michigan, and we can close anywhere. Most title companies can, but then there might be a charge. But if you are, people are working and they have a lunch hour. That's it.
Mhm.
They've got 1 hour. So they need a closer to come either to their place of employment, or I mentioned a Starbucks. We literally can close anywhere. You
Okay.
mentioned communication is key, and I know that that word gets just thrown around like, oh, you have to be a good communication's key. However, it really is. And picking up the phone, I think in any business
Right.
is key. And we
Yeah.
we actually pick up the phone. We want you to understand kind of what we're looking for or what we're asking for, and we'll ask, is it okay for us to contact your buyer or your seller direct? I remember when I was in actually a realtor, and I would get like some sort of request from the title company, and by the time my sellers heard what I needed, it was so watered down and not exactly, like, it just
Right.
was a little confusing. So
Right.
we can connect directly to you. We do have in-house closers also, which makes a difference. So you're comfortable with your closer, and there's different personalities with closers, just like realtors and
Yes,
lenders
there
and
is. Yeah, you're right.
yeah.
Yeah.
And so we have in-house closers, meaning that they are employed by Titleocity, and we also use local third party closing company. So we're real particular about how we represent you and your clients at closing. And so we make sure that we've got, the best of the best out there. And a couple of things we do for our realtor partners is we do have a marketing component. Don't be surprised if Bryan reaches out and asks for a Google review, because one of the things that we can do is, and it's, you should, and it's a nice way to get in touch with your clients, and
Sure,
they're going to say all kinds of great things about you. And then we turn those, Google reviews into graphics, and then you can post on social media so people can remember, Bryan is an awesome agent, and,
awesome. Great.
Yeah. So there's, lots of great things that we do at Titleocity. And having an agent advocate like myself, and just getting out there with realtors and training and that kind of thing. So that's our job, is to help you grow your business. And keep your
thank you. And you guys do a fantastic job. You have a great reputation. So again, this is Dawn Burdick from Titleocity. Thank you so much for coming out. This was
fun. I know you've got the radio voice, the DJ voice. That, right? Okay. Well, welcome me back, and we'll talk more about deeds and have some more fun with it.
Yeah, believe it or not, folks, there's a lot more to title than what we've even discussed today, but we're not going to jam all that into a 4-hour podcast. Anyway, if you'd like to learn more about real estate, visit my YouTube channel, Bryan Gutierrez, Keller Williams Real Estate. You can also check out my Facebook page, Bryan Gutierrez, Keller Williams. Yeah, if you have any questions about real estate or any questions about title, we will put Titleocity's contact information with this podcast post. And feel free to reach out to either one of us if you have any questions. So once again, thank you so much for coming out.
Thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.